Guys, I just made my first Pygame game, and I wanted to kind of show it off. So these are what we use. We just init the font, set the width, and stuff like this. I'm gonna go over it pretty quickly because I also got to do my devlog. So then we get a background. We over here we get the image to have the Pygame image download, and then we use the Pygame transform scale to make it as big as the entire screen. This is the size of the window that I'll make if I click this and run the code. We have a few things like this, which I would normally have defined an object and just run like that, but this works different. Stars that don't look like stars. We got two fonts that are pretty much the same. I might change this to like cursive or something. Yeah, let's actually go ahead and do that real quick. Okay. Then this is the rendering logic right here. If I separate that. So we need to know the player, how long it's been, and the stars. We first draw the background to the image. We start from the top left corner, as this is the same size, it just covers everything. We take the time. We have a time text, and this is when we draw how long you've already been playing. So the elapsed time is what you got. Then we draw that to the screen. We have 10 so instead of starting up like in the corner right here, we actually draw like over here, so give it a little space. Then for the array of stars that we stick in, stars, we just draw them all white, and then we update the screen to show the next frame. And this is where all the game logic happens, which is fairly basic compared to some of the stuff I've written on my own, but it's in a completely new language for me. So I had to follow a tutorial, and I had to take it slow. It was like a 10-minute tutorial. So we have a variable run, which I would have normally called something like keep playing or something like that, which is essentially this acts as like, as soon as we turn this to false, I'm not going to type that, but since we turn that to false, the game loop will stop. We have a player right here, which is of the class rect. I would have just defined a regular object, but this is more efficient because it's Pygame, so we got to follow their rules. We get a clock, which allows us to have like a frame things instead of using like request animation frame. We have tick or whatever. We get the time that we start. We start off with a large increment, which is like every 2,000 milliseconds, I think it is. This will do it. Then we got star count, which is how we do that. The list of stars, if we've been hit. And then while we're telling the game to run, we can do that like however we want. We increment this by however much time, many milliseconds have passed. So every 2,000 milliseconds that will happen. And then elapsed time, we set it to how long the time will start. So this gets the time that it is. We do that to get this one. And so this is when we started. This is right now. So it tells us how long we've been playing. Then if star count, so like if enough time has passed that this is numbers bigger than this one, then we're going to repeat something 3 times. This is equivalent to a for loop right there. Star x will get a random x value based on the width and the star width. This is the screen width. This is the width of how big the star is. We've seen that defined up here. Then we just create the rectangle with these properties and add it to our stars array. Then we subtract 50 from our star add increment. I guess it should be called interval, but whatever. And we subtract 50, and if it's less than 200, we leave it at 200. So it gets the maximum of that. So if it's like 200, we're not going to subtract anymore. And then star count is 0, so we start up our interval again. Then this gets the events. I don't know what all the events are, but I do know that there's pygame.quit, which is like if I click the X, it'll fire off this event right here. Then we turn run to false, and we break from there, so we don't check anymore. If keys, sorry, hold up. So this is like if I press any keys, it'll update an array. So this is basically this is what I had to do to get like the controls for the Just a Punk thing, because like, see, we check and see if we have like the number, and we check and see if the keys has that number pressed, and then we run some logic to make sure that it's not on the side of the screen. And then so like k left is basically the number associated with this. It's a Python thing. Like if I put dir pi, there's a lot of variables that are capital K and then just like the name of buttons, and I was like, oh, okay, so that means that you have to kind of do like this. Yeah, we got like this big array, which is what's pressed, what's not. So I bet it's true, false, whatnot. So this part, I'm overcomplicating it, but if the left button is pressed, we check and see that we're not going to move off the screen going this way, and then we move this way. Same thing for this one. We check to make sure that our width and our x plus the speed that we would move is less than that side. Then we move. Then we go through this logic, which I think I've shown you. Just draw it really quickly. Then for all the stars, so we get a copy of the array. He explained why, but for star y, we add our star velocity, which again is found right up here. So if star y is greater than the height, so basically the top is moved down and is off the screen, like that, then we'll remove the star. If it's not, we check that the star width plus the star height, so the star, this is the star height, this is star y, so we check like that, and we can see if it's above the top of the player. So if the bottom is at least as low as the top of the player, then we'll run the function to check if they collide. I've used to writing these myself, the collision functions, but apparently they got a collide rect, so that's convenient. I mean, it is a game library, it's Pygame. Then we remove the stars and we set hit to true. We could also substitute this for a life thing. If hit, then we make the lost text out of the font too, which is basically the same, just bigger. We render the text you lost. We do that and we use this. Then we just use split to draw it to the screen. We draw the background. I draw the background because I want everything to disappear. If I were to comment this out, you would notice the difference, and I might show you. Then we center it, which is actually a bit more complicated than JavaScript. So with lost text, it's what we're rendering. We get the position, then we do like this. See, the way he had it, this was actually a 2, but I put it to 3. Then, because we've set... Where did we set it? Sorry, give me a moment to focus. There's some point that it sets it to true if we hit. Give me a moment. That says run to false or some part. Oh. So that says the running to false. Actually, I don't know where it is. Could have sworn there was some part. Guess not. But anyways, once we're out of this loop and running as false, then we go ahead and quit the game. And then we run this this main code function. This is essentially the code it is. We run that only if this is the file that's been activated. So let's go ahead and trigger the file. And yeah, I've reused assets. So these are the stars, which are just rectangles. And if I hit into one, it says you lost. Oh, I guess cursor is not supported. So let me just go back to Comic Sans. so you can see how that is. But you can see we kind of have this styled out. So if I go over here, you see the styling of that. You lost, and then it's done. Or if I click the X, it quits. I'm actually thinking to. I might actually think of using something else. Let's try sans serif though. See if we can get that. So I'm gonna try it like this first. And then we gotta get hit to test it, which is a bit of an annoyance. No. Perhaps it's the... Oh, okay, I guess you can't. That's the only annoyance though, is because whenever we do pause the game, it doesn't do that. But yeah. Now I need to go ahead, I need to go ahead and do my devlog now. So I could explain like I promised. But yeah, this is my first Python game. Like actual visual graphics. I've never been able to get like an image going up. So I'm gonna obviously stick to what I know. Which, I mean, like, if you just look at the syntax, it's way different. Actually, hold on, let me go over some of the differences. Maybe I should. Like, see, we got like a huge difference. So I'm not gonna go over too much. Like, obviously, this is different. We don't have like the curly brackets. We just have the indentation. But let's go over some of the differences. So here we have set font setups, which is extremely different from what I'm used to in the canvas element, which I tend to use canvas in a lot of my games, even though it's a little inconvenient. It's just right there, and it's a little bit easier for me than centering divs. Just draw to an area. So we define this in the beginning, and we have sort of like this index. Perhaps we could do like an array or something like this. I don't know, or like a font object with different names. But you're pretty limited. If you need a new one, you got to make it. If you need to scale it up or shrink it down. Whereas for JavaScript, I could do ctx dot font equals Comic Sans 30, for example. And this sets it to use this. Another thing that is very different is like right here where it's render, we don't have to render that. The closest thing we have to do is like ctx dot, we'll just use fill style equals white. And then what I told you earlier, then we would be able to do like, say, ctx dot fill style dot font, if I could type, dot font equals then if we go up here, we see that it is Comic Sans 70. Yeah, Comic Sans 70. I don't usually use Comic Sans. I usually use sans serif. I might have to check out Comic Sans. That seems pretty nice. So like I tend to use like this, or I'll use cursive. So like we choose the font, make sure that it's a period and not a comma. And now then for this part, we could say like ctx dot align text equals center, and that will make it to where every time that we do that, it will like center it along the X, and then CTX dot, I think it's, oh no, I can't remember if it's text base or align base. And then, but it's just center, okay? And then to do this one, we actually just go CTX dot fill text. Then here is where we write you lost. Here is where we would write you lost. Then we would write the whole thing. We could actually use, if we have the canvas thing, we could just use can dot width, so it's a little more convenient, but we can't control the window size, so I guess this has this thing. Divided by 2, can dot height divided by 2. And let me just go ahead and I'll X this out so you can definitely see that. And then it just kind of updates immediately when you're done. Like, it just kind of automatically does that for us. So if I just copy this, and I'll show you how I would do this if this were a JavaScript code. So if I just sort of drop these properties here, and yeah, I would also be able to just use something I already have to be able to. I know CTX is not defined. I'm just using an example, bruh. Gotta admire Python though; it's pretty cool. So then this font. So this part where we tell it white. Yeah, we'd be able to just do that here, which means down here we wouldn't actually need this. It's black by default, but because we would be putting it here, we wouldn't need it down there. So let me just go ahead and put that back. The text align, we do not need align text because it is left by default, which means that it's basically the same as this does. The same as when you blend it, that's essentially the same. It's the left part. I think we do need text-based top because I think it is center by default, but I'm not actually sure about that. Then the text here is, what's the text? Okay. So there are many ways to do this. The way I tend to do it by habit would be plus round is not an actual function. I think math dot round, but I don't use that. Math dot round elapsed time, right? Then if we wanted, we could plus s. Of course, there's another convenient way. So we could do like this, which I know we could do in Python as well. But if we want to do something similar to this, I think we can use backticks, then time. We need a $sign. $sign, not a 4. Then we put the math dot round elapsed time. And then when we get back out, we put the S. So this here, this little thing right here, is essentially the same as this. The backticks act like the F, And these curly brackets act the same here as long as we got this $sign. Let me just go ahead and put it like that so it'll stop bothering me. Then we just put the... Then when we blit 1010, that actually goes into this final function as well. 10. I am bad at this. 10. So it kind of looked like this. I would say there are pros and cons to everything. To both of them. So like the con to JavaScript is that if I want to change colors, I have to change it manually. Like I can't just change it as I do it. But I would say that a pro, I kind of prefer it that way because the pro of that is that I don't have to type out a color every time, type white every time. So like if I want this red though, I do have to specify it. With two text, it makes very little to no difference. But I think this font system will probably be a little bit of a hassle for me because I'm used to just kind of deciding what I want as I need it rather than defining a font. Don't get me wrong, I would love to try this out and figure out, and it'd probably make it very easy to get a bunch of things styled the same way without having to remember, oh wait a minute, I didn't update these in this order, I updated these in this order. You know what I mean? Like it's not here, here, here. It's here, 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 and that one. So I gotta keep that in mind in JavaScript. Whereas here, I just use the font, and then as I'm rendering it, I use the color, which is probably what they were going for. So it's a little easier to not have to remember the order, but because I always render stuff in the same order, and I always just specify it by default to make sure it's exactly what I want, it doesn't matter to me anyways. But yeah, it's very interesting difference. And then for the rectangles, the Pygame rectangles usually there, but I usually just do like player equals. I'm not going to show you right now because it's a little bit of hassle. But essentially, I usually just define my own object. But I do like that Pygame gives us a rect class. And what's amazing is that it uses the X and the Y, which is exactly what I use. I use X, Y, and then for the speed and movement and physics and stuff, I use like volx, volx, voly for the players and the stuff like that. So it's cool that Python has its own like setup to do like that. I wish it had like the physics stuff, but that's okay. And I'm also very curious. Can I like just go like player dot x full equals 7, and like can I use this for physics? I'm very excited to learn, and I have no idea how to do this kind of stuff in Python, but I've always been interested in Python, you know. This one, we have a dedicated tick thing to it. So like here you put the tick here. In JavaScript though, we'd say like make this a function run. Then at the bottom here, at the bottom of it, we'll do request animation frame run. So if we pretend that this while loop is its own function and it's called run, we would put this at the bottom, and then outside we'd put the run function. And then if we wanted to do the tick thing, we could actually restructure this, and so we could have like time, and then this is similar to the lambda. It's an arrow function, and then we would just put run time. So to convert it to back, this is the arrow function. This is kind of like a lambda, but it's more like a regular function. You can do whatever. It's just synonymous. We got the run arrow here. We got the run function here. So all of this here goes in the function, and then this is the function that we call at the end. So the function does all this logic, Then at the end, it waits for the next animation frame, which does basically the same thing this does. And just as this returns the number of seconds and puts it here, this function is past this, so we get time. So like if I pass 0 here, and then here we would take in time, then we just say star count plus equals time. You know what I mean? So it's pretty interesting how it's the same exact thing, just different. So yeah, I've wasted a little too much time on this. Pretty awesome though.